first 2 months. The next morning, Benton read more company and product literature, and at 10 a.m. she walked over to Linton's office to see if there was anything she could do. Scoville was sitting very close to Linton discussing some aspect of the brand review. Benton thought they seemed somewhat intimate, and she felt like an intruder. Linton suggested that Benton keep reading and getting to know her way around the company, and that she would meet with her to tell her about Pure and Fresh's history in about an hour. In that meeting, Benton learned that Linton had been in her present job 8 months and that Benton was the first assistant product manager assigned to the brand. At noontime, Helene Brenner, one of the assistant product managers Benton had met during interviewing, invited Benton to join her and some other product management staffers for lunch in the company cafeteria, where, according to Brenner, everyone ate. In the group Benton and Brenner joined, everyone was from a different brand. They were all very friendly and asked Benton questions about her background and personal life. They seemed to Benton more interested in her than Scoville and Linton had been. Benton listened to a discussion about MBAs in product management and learned that under the direction of the Vice President of Marketing, Bob Mitchell, a Harvard MBA, recruiting practices had been changed. Previously, new assistant product managers were selected from a mix of MBA and non-MBA candidates. The emphasis now was on recruiting MBAs from top-notch schools for entry-level marketing positions. As a result, the home care division was becoming increasingly dominated by people holding MBAs. Benton thought this helped explain Scoville and Linton's apparent resentment of her. 2 associate product managers at Benton's table complained about the lack of upward mobility in home care beyond their level. One warned Benton that if anyone ever asked her what her goals were, she should reply that she wanted to get ahead at Houseworld, and never say I'm at Houseworld to get some good marketing training. Early in the morning of her 4th day at Houseworld, Benton jotted down some questions she had about Pure and Fresh, and around 9 a.m. she walked over to Linton's office hoping to get some answers. She tapped on the door and inquired, "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" When Linton looked up and realized that it was Benton, she quickly covered up what she was writing and replied, "I'm doing something right now, why don't you come back later?" Benton thought her boss looked as if she was not quite awake, and once again Benton felt she was intruding. Benton left disappointed that Linton did not want to make any time for her. Making her way back to the other side of the floor, Benton decided to ask Scoville her questions. He leaned back in his chair, and in what was to Benton his familiar all-knowing manner, gave her his answers. He ended by saying, "Don't worry about asking me questions. You're in a learning mode as an assistant and can't be expected to know that much." Benton did not enjoy what she felt to be his condescending attitude, but she appreciated his taking the time to answer and began turning regularly to Scoville when she needed to know something. Benton's month-long formal orientation to Houseworld began during her 2nd week. For 2 days each week she met with department heads of the staff groups from finance, market research, R&D, legal, and manufacturing. During this time, she was advised that she should learn about the chemistry of the air freshener as well as about the design, packaging, financial, and legal aspects of the product. Meanwhile, Scoville asked Benton to get artwork approval forms for Pure and Fresh coupons signed off by all the department heads, which involved taking the forms to each department and waiting around for the secretaries to get their bosses' signatures. Benton felt like a gopher, but she assumed this boring task was just another part of being an assistant. She hesitated to ask for more responsibility for fear of coming across as an aggressive MBA. In her 3rd week, Benton began to accompany Scoville and Linton to meetings with different staff groups and the ad agency. Linton's presentations at these meetings impressed Benton as articulate and persuasive. At first, Benton did not feel that she had much to offer in these meetings and was somewhat overwhelmed by the background knowledge that she needed to acquire for Pure and Fresh. Even when she did have an opinion, however, Benton usually deferred to Scoville and Linton, recalling Scoville's learning mode comments. She thought it best to be quiet and act like a learner. Besides, Scoville and Linton rarely asked Benton for her opinion, and Benton felt they made no effort to treat her as one of the brand team. Benton began to feel like a fifth wheel. When she had been at Houseworld for about a month, Benton went out after work for drinks with Helene Brenner. Brenner had an MBA from Columbia and had been at home care for about 9 months. She told Benton about a presentation she had made that day. "I think I really impressed Richard Clark with all my charts and slides. You know, when you do presentations around here, you've got to be completely prepared with all the facts and figures. Presentations are a key way to get visibility with your group product manager and higher." Benton learned that Brenner had made her first presentation after 3 months on the job. While she felt it was early for her to be concerned about presentations, Benton asked what else was important to becoming successful in marketing and home care. Brenner commented that the people who succeeded were enthusiastic. but not pushy, and were ambitious, creative, and analytical. Brenner cautioned Benton about working long hours. Don't stay at the office after 6. You don't get points around here for working late. I heard about an assistant product manager who didn't get promoted because he was really disorganized and was always at the office until at least 7. In Benton's 5th week, Linton asked her to analyze some sales data and to write a memo on her findings. Benton knew memos were important at Houseworld, and that writing good ones was a key to receiving top management visibility. Linton had Benton revise her memo 4 times before she passed it up to the group product manager, Jack Vernon. The memo was well received, and Vernon personally commended Benton on her work with a scrawl at the top of the memo saying, "Nice job." Even so, Benton derived little sense of accomplishment because she had not been allowed to make recommendations or take any action beyond the analysis. Instead, Scoville and Linton used the analysis to develop plans for pure and fresh television ads, which looked much more exciting than her assignments. From what she had been told in the recruiting process, and given her responsibilities and accomplishments at Right Away, Benton expected to be more involved in all aspects of the brand business, and after developing action plans every day for 2 years at HBS, she was dissatisfied with only performing analyses. Several days later, Benton spoke with Gary Carter, an associate product manager with whom she shared her train commute and chatted regularly. His brand group also had a new assistant who had just started, and Benton learned that she was helping plan a promotion for next year and working on pricing recommendations. Benton described the assignments that she had been given and revealed that she felt frustrated and underutilized. She did not mention, however, the difficulties she was having with Linton and Scoville, since she believed that loyalty to one's superiors was essential in the corporate world. Carter agreed that Benton's abilities were not being fully used, but had no explanation for her situation. Benton was discouraged and wondered if she was doing something wrong or if she had gotten stuck with a lousy management team. Benton thought that except for Linton and Scoville, she was getting along well with the people in her network at home care and had made it a point to be friendly to everyone. Her peers frequently invited her to go to lunch and for drinks after work. Benton often chatted with the brand's secretary and had no problems getting her work typed on time. When she needed people from the staff groups to provide her with information, she always got their cooperation. She was confident that Jack Vernon liked her, based on his commendations on her memos and from chats the two had about Harvard. On the other hand, her relationships with Linton and Scoville had not appreciably advanced. Scoville frequently called over the divider, "Lisa, can you run these numbers for me?" And "Lisa, when will all the approvals be signed?" Unlike Benton, Scoville often had trouble getting others to do his bidding, and frequently ended up doing such tasks himself or asking Benton to do them. 6 weeks had passed and Linton still had not given Benton her objectives, as she had promised on the first day, nor had she invited her to lunch. An assistant product manager's first year with Houseworld was supposedly critical for later success, and Benton began to have some doubts about her future with the company, especially as she recalled a few incidents that had occurred in her 3rd and 4th months. The typing incident. One afternoon in August, Benton was trying to complete a memo and she noticed that the headings on one of her charts, which had been created by the staff secretary, were not lined up properly. Since error-free reports were expected in home care, she decided it must be corrected. The secretary was now on vacation. Benton knew the other secretaries were extremely pressed for time while the brand review was being formalized, so she sat down at a computer for 5 minutes and redid the chart herself. As she returned to her cubicle, she noticed Vernon walking in her direction, and she was surprised and disturbed by his insistence that she come to his office immediately. Once inside his office, Vernon quickly shut the door, leaned back in his chair, and said to Benton, "I don't know what you are doing, but I never want to see you doing word processing in this company again. We have secretaries to do that kind of work, and there is no reason why you, particularly a woman, should be seen doing it. It destroys your credibility not only with the people on your team, but also in the secretary's eyes." Benton, slightly annoyed, responded, "You really misinterpreted the situation. I was only there for a few minutes and thought it would be much quicker to fix the heading on one of my charts myself than to wait until one of the other secretaries had some time to make the correction. We really don't have adequate coverage with our secretary on vacation." She thanked Vernon for his concern and said that it would not happen again, but inside, she felt angry. She regarded her work as part of a team effort and considered his reaction overblown. But she also wondered if Vernon might have a point and recognized that he was looking out for her interests. Linton's office was next to Vernon's, and she had observed Benton going into his office. Later that day, she asked Benton about the incident and became furious at her description. "He had no right to tell you that," she said when she heard the story. "First of all, He should have told me and let me talk to you. And secondly, that whole issue itself is ridiculous. Benton suspected that her boss was fuming because Vernon had gone over her head and approached Benton directly. Several days later, Linton mentioned that she had discussed the matter with Vernon and commented, "You know, there are times and places when we have to do things like word processing." While Benton still was not sure what she should do in future situations, she concluded that since Vernon was more senior in the department, she would follow his instructions. The copying episode. A week after the typing incident, Benton was working on a coupon test market booklet that would be mailed to 600,000 homes in 3 test cities. Benton's job was to help design the pure and fresh coupons and iron out the details with the company producing the booklets. Linton and Scoville were rushing to meet their own deadlines on the marketing plan. At one point, Scoville called to Benton from his cubicle. Tired of his patronizing manner and his demands, she retorted, "I'll be there in a minute." 5 minutes later, she walked into his office. Scoville wanted Benton to do some copying for him while he made some last-minute corrections on the marketing plan. She replied that she would do the copying with him in a while, but she was occupied with her own project for the moment. When he insisted that she do it immediately, she snapped, "Ron, why don't you plan your time better and do your own copying?" "Oh, I see, you're too good for copying," he responded. Furious, Benton snatched up the papers and headed for the copy machine. When Benton returned from lunch that day, she found a note on her desk summoning her to Linton's office. "I understand you're too good for copying," Linton said when Benton entered. For the first time feeling genuine animosity toward her boss, Benton proclaimed, "That is patently false. Half of the material is already on Ron's desk and I'm going to finish the rest this afternoon. I was upset because he treated me like some servant girl, and I was getting tired of his patronizing attitude. I have never felt too good for this kind of work. In fact, when I was at Right Away last summer, I counted inventory, I dusted the shelves, Linton cut her off, shouting, "This is a team effort. Everyone is overworked. You'll just have to contribute. Copying is a part of your job, even if you are a Harvard MBA. Benton felt there was no point in arguing with her. Abruptly rising, she snapped, "I'm going to do the rest of the copying right now." Benton felt furious and frustrated. It was the first time that her boss had actually yelled at her. She felt that Linton should have acted as a buffer between her and Scoville, and instead she blamed Benton. Marching into Scoville's office, Benton announced, "You had a lot of gall going to Deborah when I've been doing a lot of tasks for you. I don't mind copying, and I've never felt too good for copying, but I expect you to ask me for favors without being so condescending." Scoville apologized, "I'm sorry this happened. I had no idea that I came across so brusquely or that you would be so sensitive. I'll try to work on my behavior next time." Benton felt stuck. If she performed clerical tasks, she would be criticized by Vernon. If she did not comply with Scoville's request, she would be attacked for not being a team player. On the train ride home that evening, she mentioned the incident to her friend Gary Carter and asked his advice on how to deal with Scoville. Carter was surprised. Benton had rarely talked about Scoville with Carter because she knew that the two got along. While she was beginning to feel freer talking with trusted friends about Scoville, loyalty to her boss still seemed important to Benton, and she played down Linton's role in the incident. Carter suggested that Benton should stand up to Scoville and not take his crap. Easier said than done, she thought to herself. 5 days later, Vernon unexpectedly called Benton into his office. He seemed concerned to Benton and asked, "Lisa, are you happy here?" The question surprised her, and Benton guessed that her unhappiness must have showed in her demeanor, since normally people described her as bubbly and enthusiastic, and she knew that she had not been so recently. "I'm okay," she replied. "I have my ups and downs like everyone else." Vernon did not seem satisfied. "Are you sure there isn't something that you want to talk about, like how things are going with Deborah and Ron?" Vernon seemed genuinely concerned, but Benton felt she should be cautious. "I'm having some problems with Ron, but Deborah has been really good about helping me." Vernon agreed that Scoville's style was difficult to deal with, and Benton thanked him for his interest. Benton thought she had been smart politically by expressing loyalty to her boss and making her look good in her superior's eyes. However, she still was unsure how to manage her relationships with Scoville and Linton.